Should we move on to domestic elections, Krystal?
Let's talk about it.
All right. So Virginia in particular, Krystal's home state, for whatever reason, had some very interesting races last night. We can put this first element up on the screen from Punchbowl News, and they were digging into Virginia's 5th district, which results are actually still outstanding. We're going to get to them in just a moment. That, I think, might have been the most interesting race last night. We can put the next element up on the screen. We're just sort of taking a tour through these. There's a Democratic brawl in Virginia's 10th. Krystal, before I move on from this, did you have any sort of takeaway on what was going on in Virginia's 10th district? Because this one was kind of hard to get a handle on. There were so many candidates.
Yeah, so this is Jennifer Wexton was representing this district. She has a neurological condition that is untreatable, and so she's stepping down. And so this is the primary to attempt to fill this seat. This is a district that is in the sort of exurban DC area, centered in like Loudoun County, which used to, in the very recent past, at least, from my perspective, be consistently Republican. This is one of the places that has really realigned into the Democratic Party. Now, Jennifer Wexton did not have an easy race. I think it was relatively close when she, first won the seat. But this is seen as a district that Democrats at this point in time should be able to win. However, this primary apparently really went sideways. So first of all, because it is a prime, opportunity for ambitious Democrats, you had a whole bunch of Democrats jump into this race. There was no consolidation behind like this one particular candidate. You had people who were well known, who had held positions of power. You had a woman, Eileen Fillercorn, who was the former, I think, state Speaker of the House. So you had a number of names that were well known. It looked like this one dude was very well positioned. He'd raised the most money. Dan Helmer is his name. He was a state rep. And at the last minute, these revelations came out that he had been, he was a sort of serial sexual harasser, that the board that he previously had sat on, they had had to change all their rules around sexual harassment because this dude was such a problem. So you had that. You also, with the woman I mentioned before, Eileen Fillercorn, you had a scandal involving her as well, because she received the endorsement of this PAC, Democratic Majority for Israel, that if you guys follow Ryan's reporting, he's done a lot of reporting on. They're sort of APAC aligned, super PAC. They're solely pro-Israel and take the APAC line on that, et cetera. They endorse her, and the very next day, she donates $150,000 to them. So it really looked directly like she basically paid for that endorsement. So she was in the mix. So there was another person in this race whose name was Krystal, actually, Call. She apparently was lying about her resume and really like embellishing beyond the norm. So there was just like a whole bunch of stuff.
What the hell is going on?
I don't know. People lost their minds in this race. But so there was a whole lot of stuff going on there. Ultimately, Democrats became very nervous about the fact that this dude, Dan Helmer, could still potentially win because the allegations came out so late. And, they seem credible enough and like enough of a problem that it could potentially, in a district that still is a swing district, hand that district to Republicans. He did not prevail, however. So I think they're breathing a sigh of relief. And I'm looking at, what number element it is, though we do have the results from that we can show people of who ultimately was able to win the day. I think it's B4, guys.
Yep, B4.
I've seen enough. Suhas Subramaniam, I'm going to go with. Sorry, guys. Wins that district. So Cook Political is now giving it a rating of solid D. So I think, the Democratic establishment, no, I didn't have a horse in this race. I was glad Eileen Fillercorn lost because of that whole DMFI thing, but that's about as far as it went for me. But anyway, they'll be happy that he won and not the other gentleman. So there you go.
Yeah, and it was fairly close. I think he won by like 5. I think he ended up pulling it out by like 5 percentage points, somewhere around there. But we should also note, and I know this is always bizarre to people who've lived in Virginia for a long time, but if you Google wealthiest county in the United States, It is Loudoun County as of right now. They have the highest median income, sort of formerly rural area, further out than Fairfax County, outside of D.C., but a lot of people from those big tech companies, defense contractors that have landed in Northern Virginia over the years. This is a district that's full of those sorts of people. It was a center of the sort of school board battle in 2020, 2021. So it's fairly interesting how this ended up playing out, and that it became such a big battleground. I can't imagine the amount of money that was spent just for this one seat.
Yeah, Loudoun is a really beautiful area. Was in some ways still is this sort of like horse country, so if you're a wealthy lobbyist and you have to commute into DC or you've retired, like this is sort of the prime area that you've moved to. I'm sure they've experienced a boom post-pandemic with people having the hybrid remote work schedules as well, so that you can more easily live in a place like Loudoun where you are going to have a decent commute if you need to go into the city. But if you only have to do that a couple times a week, then it makes a lot of sense. So in any case, this is an area, right, to point out, it was one of the centers of like the school board battles. I think Republicans, when they elected Glenn Youngkin, got very excited that this is the type of place that could be back in play. And that's still theoretically possible, but I do think Democrats got, a decently strong contender here, and it's likely they'll be able to hold on to this seat. And that of course matters a lot when you consider what is the House margin right now, 3 seats or something like that. It's as close as it could possibly be. So each one of these seats becomes incredibly pivotal and potentially determinative in terms of the next House majority.
Yeah, sigh of relief at the DNC, I'm sure, the DCCC, I should say, for these results. Now, staying in Virginia, because believe it or not, we have 2 more Virginia races to talk about. Eugene Vindman, a lot of people know what Alexander Vindman, but his twin brother, Eugene Vindman, who is also part of the whistleblowing on Donald Trump's, quote, perfect phone call, which we needn't get into, Krystal, but part of the whistleblowing and that entire sort of impeachment saga that played out during the Trump administration, won a primary, a Democratic primary. This is for Abigail Spanberger's district, which I believe is Virginia 7. Yesterday, right. Virginia 7 yesterday, you get Eugene Vindman, twin brother, $5 million he raised to win this seat in Congress, or the primary for the seat in Congress. Krystal, again, because this is Virginia, that is, I imagine, going to be a fairly contested general election. It's probably safe, Dem, but could actually turn into something going forward. Again, he raised $5 million. Spanberger is running for governor, sort of an establishment Dem favorite, centrist, and this is, in a lot of ways, makes sense as somebody who would potentially replace Abigail Spanberger. True. But I could see this escalating a little bit in the general election contest.
So this is the district that I live in. I explicitly voted against Vindman yesterday in the primary. I sort of expected he would win, but
I guess you hate freedom and democracy.
That's it. I just don't want to preserve democracy. I'm against that.
Fascist.
Yeah. This district, it's been redrawn recently. So I formerly was in more of a conservative, more rural district. Now it's been drawn, so it takes in more of the sort of exurban area. That does make it much more of a swing district. The reason you're joking about how he's the perfect successor to Spanberger's former CIA. So these are like 2 deep staters. I guess people around here just love the deep state. I don't know what to tell you. But he obviously has huge fundraising capacity. I don't know his real capabilities as a politician. It doesn't really matter that much at these House level. People don't tune into them enough to really distinguish between the political talent of various actors, et cetera. But because he has that national fundraising base, I'm sure the party loves him and feels like this is, exactly who we want to be the face of the Democratic Party in 2024. So there you go. And, I do think that this district is rated, lean or likely or something Dem by Cook Political. So I think he's most likely to prevail, but it is still a district that could kind of go either way. And you mentioned Abigail Spanberger running for governor. I think she'll have a decent shot at that as well. In Virginia, you can only serve 1 term as governor, so Glenn Youngkin has already lame duck term limited out, which, in my opinion, that rule is very silly, but not that I'm a Glenn Youngkin lover, but just in general, I think that's a silly rule to have that tight of term limits. But in any case, she will be on the ballot next time the governor's race comes up here. So yeah, that's where we are with that one.
And let's shift over to Republican races now, because over in Oklahoma, Tom Cole, we mentioned this this was actually on the tear sheet that we put up first, combined with what happened in Virginia 5. But if we take a quick visit outside of Virginia, we're then going to return to Virginia, of course. But let's just start in Oklahoma, where 11-term Congressman Tom Cole, Republican, had a primary with 4 different candidates in it. And some of them were sort of like upsurge, almost, I don't know, it reminded me kind of how the Tea Party, you had these sort of anti-establishment candidates that were all jockeying for a position. He managed to hold on in that race, which was a fairly interesting result, but it was a pretty convincing margin of victory for Tom Cole. Let's go back over to Virginia 5, where a former guest of Counterpoints, House Freedom Caucus Chairman Bob Good, is currently trailing. We can put this is B5 up on the screen. He is trailing 285 votes to McGuire. And this is a crazy race. And one of the more interesting, if not the most interesting results that came in last night, saving the best for last year, because McGuire ended up getting endorsements from Donald Trump, Kevin McCarthy, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene jumped into this, and Virginia 5 became this bizarre, probably will be one of the most interesting primary races on the Republican side this entire cycle, this bizarre sort of test case battleground over Trump, McCarthy, DeSantis, all of that. Bob Good, again, currently the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, looks like he's about to lose his primary by a few hundred votes because he voted against Kevin McCarthy and he endorsed Ron DeSantis. So while Kevin McCarthy is out there, still going after Matt Gaetz, if you listen to Matt Gaetz's take on things, is kind of shivving him with these ethics investigations from behind the scenes. That's how Matt Gaetz put it when there was an announcement of a new ethics investigation into him just this week. Kevin McCarthy is seeking revenge against Bob Good, who is one of the few, they needed just a few people to vote against Kevin McCarthy in order to oust him as speaker. Bob Good was one of those people. He also endorsed DeSantis over Trump, which brought Trump into the race. Bob Good couldn't be accused by anyone's standards of being sort of moderate, but because he endorsed DeSantis over Trump and because he voted to oust McCarthy, all of the support came in for McGuire. And it looks like it was enough to put him over the edge, even though Good still had support from other people, Freedom Caucus people, Chip Roy, other sort of people in MAGA spaces. It was kind of MAGA on MAGA violence down in Virginia 5 last night, Krystal. And it looks like, again, the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, who, when Ryan and I interviewed Bob Good, I want to say this was back in February, somewhere around there of the winter, he basically said, reporting about the Freedom Caucus's divisions is overstated. We're okay. He really went after Marjorie Taylor Greene. I forget exactly the epithet that he used, but just used, I don't think it was, what did the other representative call her? Like blonde, bad, butch body. I don't think he said that, but it was brutal.
Bleach blonde, I think.
Yeah.
Built butch body, that's the one.
It was alliteration, poetic. It was great, but in both directions. I mean, I just unironically enjoyed that exchange. I don't think we ever talked about it on the show, but just perfect. It's not the Congress we need, but the Congress we deserve. Krystal, that the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, more powerful than I think so many people realize, is about to lose in this MAGA on MAGA violence. It shows you Democrats are getting their normies, at least in Virginia, their normies are hanging on. Normie hung on in Oklahoma on the Republican side, but I don't know. I don't know that Republicans are there's in so many ways, like it's still downstream of these like 2016 divisions, which were in and of themselves downstream of like the 2010 divisions. It's just this long simmering battle that they can't put a lid on.
Yeah, and it seems like, by the way, the race isn't called yet. So it's possible. It's only separated by a few hundred votes, but McGuire's taken the lead. He's been the lead, by those few hundred votes for a while. So it's looking good for him. So we'll ultimately see. I mean, it could even go to a recount. We don't know. But, it looks like good could have survived maybe just the Kevin McCarthy thing. Because didn't Kevin McCarthy also come for Nancy Mason? That didn't work out down in South Carolina. So I don't know that he has the juice on his own to take someone out. But then when you endorsed DeSantis against Trump, that was really the one that seemed to seal his fate. I'm curious from you, Emily, what do you read into this? What does it mean politically? You mentioned that he's quite powerful. What does it mean sort of ideologically? Or does it just demonstrate that ideology is really not even second to tertiary or way down the list from just aligning yourself with the right politicians and picking the right horses and staying on Donald Trump's good side?
Yeah, I mean, it's really about Donald Trump at the end of the day. I think that's basically what it comes down to. I think the other big takeaway is that the Freedom Caucus actually is a mess. And that sounds like maybe a background Capitol Hill story, but I really don't think it is. I mean, we saw what happened with Kevin McCarthy, the 19 ballots just for him to become speaker, then the obviously motion to vacate, which only takes one person, and he's ousted. They're now in the situation with Mike Johnson, where a lot of people will say behind closed doors, shit, we were better off with Kevin McCarthy. That's basically the understanding that a lot of people have. Or some people will say, maybe we don't know if we were better off with McCarthy, but it was still, worth the effort to oust him, to sort of scare the Republican establishment, et cetera. The bottom line, though, is that without a Freedom Caucus that is able to be effective, the Republican establishment is going to get whatever it wants. And it's hard for everyone to be, on the same page when you have such a tiny margin. And House Republicans, in and of themselves aren't that powerful when they have such a small margin. But they are still powerful enough. Kevin McCarthy gave a lot to the Freedom Caucus. He put them on the committees they wanted to be on, gave them chairmanships that they wanted to have. He gave them the motion to vacate, which eventually is what was his downfall. He gave them a lot. Mike Johnson is giving them basically nothing, even though they always felt like Mike Johnson was kind of Freedom Caucus adjacent. And so these Trump divisions have just basically destroyed the Freedom Caucus. They can't get on the same page. They can't be unified as a bloc because of those divisions, which means that the Republican establishment is just basically running, just bulldozing any sort of, any sort of disagreement. And the last thing I'll say on that point is, as annoying as some people may find the Freedom Caucus, I will say they are an actual unified anti-establishment voting bloc in the House of Representatives. And so while I may not agree with everything that they do, they are the only real challenge to the Republican sort of pro-war, pro-defense contractor, pro-austerity, all down the line establishment that exists in Congress. And so things are at least a lot more interesting and fun and, worth debating when they have a sort of organized voice that is actually able to put some pressure on the establishment.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically, since the Tea Party era, this has been a group, not the same individuals, but this vibe and this grouping has been giving hell to Republican leadership, since the early 2010s. And as a leftist, I've always looked at these groupings with jealousy, that there was a willingness to use power. Because, if you have this slim majority, then basically the power is up for the taking for a small group of people who are willing to use hardball tactics. And the Freedom Caucus is currently the only group that really has exhibited any willingness to actually use the power that they have. So I don't agree. There are a few of their goals I do agree with, but, mostly they are pro-austerity. I mean, they're, hardline conservative Republicans, obviously. I don't have a lot of common cause with them. But tactically, I've been very envious of their willingness to throw their weight around in a way that we just literally never see on the Democratic side. I mean, this was the hope of that the squad would engage in a similar adversarial type of politics vis-a-vis their own leadership, and that just has not manifested whatsoever. Yeah, I do want to give, you've got, Rashida Tlaib and others who've been willing to be very critical on Israel specifically. But in general, when they had the opportunity, when Democrats were in their own narrow majority and there was a possibility of engaging in similar adversarial politics within their own party coalition, we didn't see any of that.
And a quick fact check. Producer Max says, bleach, blonde, bad built, butch, body.
Okay.
Which I don't think we had in the proper order. We may have even left something out. So bleach, blonde, bad built, butch, body. Thank you, Producer Mac, for the
I know
fact
there were
check.
T-shirts made, so guys, just check those out.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.